Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask the Farmer. I believe this is episode number 5 if I'm not mistaken, and as I promised, try and change the backdrop in each video, just to give you a little something different to look at while my ugly mug is talking to you. Well, we got the mosquitoes out here. I'm surprised you can't see them. They pretty stout. As you can tell, we're out here in the cornfield today. I've been out in the cornfield all this afternoon, carrying my hoe with me, looking for pigweeds and chopping them. Also kind of been looking at the corn crops, seeing how close it is to being physiological mature. We're actually in the very first farm that we planted. It's Pioneer 1077. We're actually down here in the bottom, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. Down here, of course, we got real deep soils down here in the bottom. Corn really hasn't wanted for anything this year, and checked the milk line on the corn plant, and it's a little over 50% of the way down. So I figure it's got about another 5 to 10 days of filling the grain before it's going to be completely done and added all the yield that it can. As you can tell, it's still solid green all the way down to the canopy. The corn plant really hadn't started cannibalizing itself, trying to get nutrients to the corn. So that means we did a really good job of giving this corn what it needed this year to make it grow. And as you can tell, we got some pretty honking big ears out here. Most of them around 16 around, somewhere in ballpark of 40 to 45 kernels long. This one right here this is probably 14 around. It's a little bit thinner, but we got some really good corn out here. And anyway, I'll probably do another video here in a few days, just giving you an update of our crops. Going around looking at all the crops. Probably gonna do some yield estimates on the corn, so be looking for that. So anyway, we got several more questions we want to get through. I don't really think I'm making much headway on getting the questions answered. It seems like every day we get more questions answered than what I was able to answer. So this series could be going on for a good while. But as always, if you got any questions about us, our farm, agriculture in general, what you see in your neighborhood, leave a comment in the comment section below. I promise I'll get to it eventually. I don't know when. Some of these questions, it might be quite a while before I can get to them, but I promise I will get to them eventually. So anyway, get started. First question, as promised from the end of our episode 4 video, Ty Seckard asked, what's my favorite cover crop and why? Well, Ty, each species of cover crop that we plant it for a specific reason. It's going to have a specific function either down in the soil or up in the soil. We can plant anywhere from 3 or 4 different species all the way up to 9 different species, just depending on what crop we just got done harvesting, the crop that's going to be planted next spring, the time of the year that we're planting in. A lot of those, all those factors come into play. Now, this corn crop right here will be going into cotton next year. We will be harvesting this in early September. We'll be planting, if we got moisture and don't have outrageously high temperatures, we'll be planting our cover crop immediately behind the combine. That means we're going to be getting it planted early in the fall. So all of our options on just about any species are on the table. We can plant whatever we want to and probably have pretty good success at it. The base plant on pretty much all of our mixtures is cereal rye. It's a grass, kind of like wheat, except it can grow really tall. It can usually grow 6 feet tall, got good deep roots, and it's also allelopathic. It produces chemicals that it exudes through the roots that are allelopathic, which means that it can kill or keep other weeds from germinating. And it's a big part of our battle against Palmer amaranth, in that it produces a lot of biomass. When we crimp it down and plant our summer crop into it, it provides a good layer. If you can see here on the ground, this is the remnants, and a lot of this was cereal rye. It provides a good, nice mulch on the soil and blocks a lot of sunlight from getting down to the soil, which keeps weeds from coming up. And as you can tell, you know, we've used some chemicals, but this late in the season, we haven't sprayed any chemicals on this farm in probably 2.5 months, and it's clean as a pin. A lot of that's due to the corn crop now shading the soil out, but some of it's also due to the cover crop there. But like I said, cereal rye is a base in every one of our mixtures. Annual ryegrass is probably my most favorite cover crop species because it just does so much for the soil. It's got the most robust root system that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it can go way down. I've dug soil pits in March, and I've documented annual ryegrass roots as deep as 6 feet deep in March. And it just does a really great job of breaking up the soil, rebuilding soil structure, getting carbon down into the soil. And in fact, annual ryegrass has been proven to exude a substance that actually breaks up frangipans, which is a hard pan down in the soil, over time, and will actually turn those frangipans back into productive topsoil. And in our part of the world, where a lot of our topsoil has already been eroded, that's a really important asset for me. Another one I really like is crimson clover, and it's got a nice root system, does good things for the soil, but it's a legume. It produces nitrogen. Behind this corn crop, we'll also probably use a little bit of vetch, a little bit of winter peas. I just like to put it in there because it's a nitrogen producer, and it's it's adding more variety out here. Gives the microbes a little something different to feed on. I don't go real whole hog in those species because by the time I come back and plant cotton, that stuff can be big, tall, and viney, and it can be really hard to plant cotton into. So I'll put a little bit out here just to add a little different variety, but I won't go whole hog on it. Buckwheat is another one we'll plant behind corn. Its roots exude a substance that make the carbon that is attached to the soil particles, it will free it up and put it in soil solution. So there's plenty of phosphorus in the soil, but a lot of it is not really plant available. And buckwheat is really important in that it helps make the phosphorus plant available for our following cash crop. We'll use daikon radishes, otherwise known as tillage radishes. They're great for breaking up any kind of compaction you've got in the field. They make a real nice thick tuber that has a whole lot of down pressure that can really bore through any compacted layers in the soil. And if they get big enough, if there's any residual nitrogen out here, like in this corn crop, there's probably going to be some, as green as the corn still is this late stage in the game. It can produce a really big tuber that can add a lot of organic matter quickly into the soil. We'll also use lentils, a little bit of lentils. It's kind of like hairy vetch. It produces nitrogen. And we'll also use rapeseed. It's another brassica like what the radishes are. However, it will typically survive throughout the winter, and it's just another form of root to really get down there and break up our hard pan. So we utilize a lot of different species. Each species has its own specific purpose. You know, in some of our other crops that we might be planting into corn next year, we'll lower the cereal rye rate, and we'll add wheat, and we'll add oats into the mix, just to kind of lower that carbon to nitrogen ratio a little bit, so a lot of nitrogen doesn't get tied up in the spring when the corn really needs it. Corn really likes to be planted behind oats. And also in our cover crop blend that's going into corn, we'll lower the rest of our grasses down in the mix as far as rate, and we'll increase the legumes, the winter peas, a lot more vetch, a lot more winter peas, and a little bit more clover, just to get a little bit extra nitrogen production in the to the corn, because it really needs a lot of nitrogen throughout the year, a whole lot more so than what cotton does. So anyway, that's just kind of a brief overview of the cover crops we use and why we use them. But I'd say annual ryegrass is by far my favorite. It's actually considered a super crop because it just does so much. Next question is from David Holst. He asks, how much per acre is tillable farmland selling for in my area? Well, David, where we're actually located at, we're about 8 miles away from the city of Jackson. So really any ground in our area that gets sold, it's really not being sold for farmland. It's being sold for either development land to build subdivisions on, or might be selling 5 acres for someone to build a house on. So farmland prices are really elevated in our area. Even though some land might be bought as farmland and kept on farming, they're really paying the development prices for that land. So I'd say the average price right here next to the shop here in Crockett County is probably $5,000 to $8,000 an acre. You get on closer to Jackson, right in the edge of Madison County, a little bit closer to some of the schools. You know, a lot of it's going for $8,000 to $10,000 an acre. I have seen some land in the area that's actually within the city limits, but just right outside of where a lot of subdivisions are. I've seen it go for $20,000 to $25,000 an acre. The farm we bought in 2018 that was featured on the American Farm, supposedly the farm that I bought without Kelly permission, you know, we bought it for about $2,800 an acre, and I couldn't jump on it fast enough because it just land just doesn't go for that. I mean, even woods, even swampland doesn't go for less than $3,000 an acre. So it's probably going to be the last piece of land that I could ever buy, because anything over $3,000 an acre, there's just no way of me being able to cash flow it, you know, by producing crops. In order to be able to pay for it, I'd have to take every bit of profit I make off that land for probably 20 years, plus pulling profit away from another part of my operation in order to be able to buy the land. So, not saying I'll never buy any land again, but it's going to surprise me, because it's going to have to be in the right place and at the right price. Next question is from Jack Stanley. He asks, how do I organize all of my records, like spraying, fertilizer, seed, yields, all that? Do I have a program on a computer, or do you write it all down on paper, farm by farm? Jack, it used to be all handwritten. Whenever I'd get done planting a field, I'd write the date down, the acres, whatever we done spraying, write down what we sprayed, the date, all that. But now, as you said, all of my equipment has monitors in it, and we're able to log the operations on the monitor. We're able to log exactly what we're putting out, the exact rate, the time of day, wind speed, if it's cloudy or sunny, you know, all that information we can capture. And then I've got a program that I use. It's called Ag Studio. It's a program that is sold by Granular, and we will import all of our data from our monitors into the Ag Studio, and then I've got all my farms on there, and it links all of my records with those farms, and then I can go in there and I can put the price we paid for whatever product. You know, it's already got the rates in there, and you know, I can print out reports showing what my exact costs are on any piece of land. If I get audited by the USDA, I can produce, you know, any kind of application records that I need to. You know, everything that we do in the field is, most of the time, it's mapped and loaded onto the computer. On that program, we can also do manual field operations, like say if I'm running the hooded sprayer and not running an automatic spray rate controller. You know, I can go in there and say, you know, on this farm I used a quart of Liberty, a quart of Direx on this date, and it's also logged as a field operation. And the same way with our planting and harvest operations. All of that data goes in. You know, I can print off yield maps. I can do multi-year yield analysis. I can write prescriptions with that software, you know, whether it be plant prescriptions to variable rate our seed, or fertility prescriptions to variable rate our fertilizer. You know, I do all of that in that program. I can also print off a lot of business reports. I use that program to actually bill out my landlords, the ones who are on a third share and share in part of the cost of the inputs. I use that to print out their bills and send it to them. That way I can be extremely itemized, extremely detailed, and they see exactly what they're paying for. You know, whenever I'm preparing stuff for the bank to get our operating line of credit approved, you know, when I'm coming up with what I think my costs are going to be for that year, you know, I can print off reports from the year before. You know, I had so many acres of corn. You know, I had so many dollars per acre in inputs, and then I can kind of guess on what my yield's going to be, because I know my costs are not going to change too awful much unless I change a big part of my program. My costs per year are not going to change too much, especially in regards with seed and chemicals. Now, fertility can vary a little bit. Our fertilizer costs next year are going to be quite a bit higher. I really don't, by doing all that, I really don't save any time over the handwritten part, because I have to go through all of our operations once it gets on our computer, and I have to double check and make sure that either me or Zach or Kelly typed the right thing in the monitor. We got the right rates. Everything's assigned to the right field. It's assigned to the right cost, and I have to double check all that to make sure it's correct. But being digital like that, I can be a whole lot more detailed, and then once I've made sure all the information in there that it's correct, you know, I can go in there and I can do a lot of different analysis to find out exactly where my money's going, whether it's actually making me money or I'm spending more money than I want to make, and I can do a whole lot of stuff like that. So anyway, hope that answers your question. Next question is Sam Reamer asks, what, if anything, will you do differently to mitigate the slug damage you experienced this year in the future? Now, Sam, you are correct. This spring was probably the most difficult spring I've ever faced. You know, it was cold and wet all the way up through the early part of June. You know, really our first day that I actually felt comfortable putting seed in the ground was May 16th. We'd already planted all of our soybeans, all our corn by then. Heck, we'd already replanted some stuff by then too. And then after we got our cotton planted, it turned off cold and wet again. And that's where we didn't have slug damage on our corn and beans. We did have it on our cotton because we had a really thick layer of biomass down there shading the soil. And because we had so much biomass down there, I thought I had my planter set up like I needed to be able to successfully plant in just about any kind of cover crop condition that we come across. But this year it was so thick, it just didn't do a good job of closing the seed trench. And I got the seed in the ground, the seed sprouted, but as it was coming up from the seed trench before it could get established, because we had an open seed trench, we basically had a 4-lane highway down there for slugs just to crawl down and just munch on the plants just right as they germinated. And I wound up losing a lot of my cotton plants that way. And in order to be able to mitigate that, you know, you really need to be able to close the seed trench, and I didn't do a good job of that. Now, I probably still would have had slug damage even if I closed the seed trench, because we had such cool, wet conditions which allow slugs to thrive, you know, 2 weeks after cotton was planted. So even after it come up, it still would have been susceptible to slug damage. As far as chemicals, there's really only one thing you can do to kill slugs. You can use a bait. It's basically a granular product. You go out there and spread it out, and it's really not that easy to apply, and it's really expensive to apply. And generally by the time you see that you need to do something for slugs, a lot of times it's already going to be too late. A lot of the damage is going to be done, and that kind of product takes time to work. But what I'm going to do for next year is make sure I get the seed trench closed. We've already ordered the equipment. I ordered another precision planting system called Furrow Force. It's going to replace my closing wheels on the back with a heavier set of closing wheels, and it's actually going to have an airbag on it that I can vary the pressure on that airbag as I'm going through the field. And in fact, it's actually going to be automated because we're going to have a load cell on there that shows how much downforce is on the packing wheel, and it can automatically adjust the airbag as conditions change going throughout the field. So I've already bought it, and I've already paid for the system. I haven't actually taken delivery, and of course we haven't put it on the planter yet, but that's going to be something that we do this winter. I'm also going to install Clean Sweep on my planter, which is basically an air cylinder that goes on the row cleaners on the front. The row cleaners I got, they do a pretty good job, but the problem is we had such thick cover crop this year, and I didn't get a great kill on the strips that I sprayed in a lot of places, that the mat was too thick for the row cleaners to really move a lot of it out of the way. They just weren't heavy enough. So that air cylinder, I can add force to those row cleaners to kind of force them down and force them to dig a little bit more through that. So hopefully once I do those two things, hopefully by then I'll be able to plant in pretty much any condition I come across. Now still, if we have 2 weeks of cold, wet weather after planting and as the cotton's trying to emerge, I could still have slug problems, but sometimes you just can't solve every problem every year. But I think going this route is going to give me the best chance of success. It's not going to be a cheap option. All that equipment's going to cost about $20,000, and that's with me putting it on myself. So, but anyway, stay tuned this winter. I'm sure we'll have a video up this winter about us installing all that stuff on the planter. All right, the next question, probably going to be the last question of this episode, is from Sarah B. She asks, what's the difference between the planter and the drill? Well, Sarah, the planter and the drill are the same in the fact that they're both designed to put seed in the ground, and usually pretty accurately. But where they differ is the way that they meter the seed. And the way they open up a seed trench. Typically, a planter is going to have double disc openers. That means it's going to have two discs running kind of a V, and as this places through the soil, it'll open up a nice trench. Whereas a drill, there can be both styles on a drill, but a lot of the no-till drills, especially from like John Deere and Case IH, they'll have one bigger, heavier blade kind of running at an angle to open up a trench. But where they really differ is in the metering system. Planters can have several different types of meters, and they all vary on their accuracy from crop to crop. But what we've got on our planter is we've got a vacuum system on our planter, whereas a big fan sucks air through holes on a disc. And that disc is driven by an electric motor, and as the air gets sucked through the holes, it will pull one seed into each hole. And then as the disc rotates around, the vacuum is cut off, and then a seed will drop down into the seed tube and go to the ground. Whereas most drills have what we call a fluted seed cup, which basically it's basically a cylinder that has flutes on it, and it turns, and gravity just feeds seed into the fluted meter. And as the ground wheels turn that meter, it kicks seed out into the seed tube, and you determine your rate by how far open you open the gate on the flute. How much of the flute you uncover, that determines how much seed you put out. Now a planter, like I said, it meters out. A planter typically meters out one seed at a time, whereas a grain drill can measure out, a thimbleful of seed at a time, and there can be multiple seeds in there. Now, we use a drill for our cover crops and our wheat because we don't need exact spacing like we do on our cotton and our corn. We want to put out so many pounds an acre, and a drill is a perfect tool for getting that, because we don't need the exact seed placement accuracy that we need with a planter. Now with like say corn, you want a picket fence stand of corn. You want one and only one seed dropped at a time into the seed trench, and you want an even space in between each plant. Otherwise, you basically just got a bunch of weeds that are competing against each other and not going to produce much corn. So planters have other different types of meters. You got finger pickup meters, you got brush meters. Both of those use gravity and the mechanical means to separate it out seed by seed. You also got plate planters, which is typically older, and but the most accurate, the newest and most advanced meters on planters are going to be vacuum meters with an electric drive, and the electric drive can vary how fast the disc spins. And that can give you different rates of population. You also got a hydraulic drive on planters on the ones that don't have electric, where you can also vary the shaft speed, how fast the disc spins. And then the standard, which was used for decades up until the last probably 20 years, is ground drive, where you have what it looks like a bicycle transmission. It looks like a 10-speed bicycle transmission on the planter, where you can choose different sprockets to vary your population. But in order to change your population, you actually have to get off the tractor and change the sprockets. You can't do it on the fly as you go throughout the field. So anyway, that's got another few questions answered. Looks like we're about the 25-26 minute mark, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Again, guys, y'all have asked some fantastic questions, having a lot of fun doing this, and we're going to keep on continuing to do it in the month of August. Keep the questions coming. I'll get to them I'll get to them as soon as I get the chance. We're going to have a couple other different types of videos in here. I just got done filming a video on how a corn plant grows. Not sure if that's going to come out before or after this video, but be looking for it. We're going to do a video on the status of our crops here real soon in the next few days. Also going to do a video on how a cotton plant grows. So got some good stuff coming here in August. So appreciate y'all watching. Y'all stay tuned.